But this first inductee has just a little bit more accolades. He came here in 1975. I'm not sure he even knew where Clarion was on the map. Spent 8 years at Clarion. Clarion's basketball team, men's basketball team, had a record of 159-67. That's a 70% winning percentage. They were 58-22 in the West, 5 times in first place in the West. 2 trips to nationals in the NAIA, 1 trip to nationals in the NCAA. Then he takes an about face and decides to coach women's tennis. And he takes a program that really wasn't doing very much and ends up winning 4 straight PSAC titles and takes 2 trips to the NCAA and has a dual meet record the last 4 years of 57-1. Please welcome Norb Baschnagel. All these interviews are meant to be relaxing and to have a good time, so you can laugh and enjoy yourself.
You're sweating a little bit.
I am a little bit, yeah. I wonder why. So I mentioned that in the open there, I'm not sure that you even knew where Clarion was, but when you got the Clarion call, did you know where Clarion was? And you have a little story behind how you really got hired, so why don't you start there?
Well, I was assistant basketball coach at University of Buffalo, my alma mater, and Joe DeGregorio and I were good friends on the recruiting trails. It was a situation where we would see each other for lunch, and recruiting is 24/7, 365 days a year, so he knew that we could get the job done. The last time we played Niagara, it was a full house, and there was a big fight. I recruited a guy named Curtis Blackmore. He's in the Hall of Fame, and his banner's waving at University of Buffalo. He averaged over 30 points a game as a high school player. And the game was really close, packed house. And one of the players from Niagara, Joe DeGregorio, was the assistant coach. And one of their players took a shot at our best player, Curtis Blackmore. And a brawl started. And both players were thrown out, and we lost by 1. But he knew that I could recruit. So I was at his basketball camp at Niagara, and we did very well. And then I was at Syracuse basketball camp with Jimmy Boeheim, and I get a call from Joe DeGregorio, and he said, "I just got the job at Clarion University. Would you be interested in being my assistant?" I says, "What is Clarion? Is it a hotel? Is it a cosmetic company? What is it?" So I never even knew where it was, but I visited Clarion University, and I can tell you, and I hope the president's listening to this, what decided me to come to Clarion was the president of Clarion University, James Gemmell. I was being interviewed by the athletic director, Frank Lignelli, and he comes in and introduces himself, and he says, "Norb," he says, "we want a championship basketball program here." And he says, "If it's a difference between $300 and $500, he says, you offer the money to him and I'll get it for you." Now, no other president, maybe other than Dr. Dale, would do that. So, but as I said, he wanted a championship program, and I believe this sincerely, and all the coaches out there, listen very carefully. It starts from the top, and don't let anybody tell you different.
Thank you. So your first year you get here, the first game, Joe D used to always say, we went to Alliance. I thought it was Alliance, Ohio. I didn't know there was an Alliance, Pennsylvania. That team goes 12-12. The next year you're 18-9. The next year, 1977, 27-3. You had some great players on that team. Mike Cicini, Reggie Wells, Terry Rossetto, Carl Greenidge. You started 19-0. You have a really good story about what happened with the 19-0.
By the way, all those players were sensational, especially, it all starts in basketball. By the way, I'm basically a basketball coach that ended up coaching a championship women's tennis program. But it all starts with a point guard. You don't have a point guard to make it happen. Mike Cicini kind of helped turn the whole thing around, and of course Reggie Wells and Joe Malice and all those guys really helped us to be successful. But we started the season 19-0, and James Mattingly comes to us after practice, and he says, my sneakers flapping. He says, I need a new pair of sneakers. I says, you can't change in the middle of the season. Anybody that plays basketball knows your feet are very important for basketball. He said, well, I can't play with these shoes. So we give him a new pair of shoes. Then all the other players get ticked off at us and say, why don't I get new shoes? So we gave them all new shoes. We got crushed at Edinburgh. So that's a true story. Don't ever change your shoes. Trust me.
That is a true story. So 78 comes along. You guys have a great season. 79 comes along. You have a great season. And 1980 comes along, and you make it to the NAIA playoffs. That year, you guys actually get to the quarterfinals, and you had a really great season there. Any thoughts about, you had Malice and Roosevelt and Gibson and Janaki, those guys were just, Joe's here, just tremendous.
Well, as I said, over the years, we were blessed with great talent. By the way, the coach is only as good as his players. If you don't have great players, I can guarantee you will not have a championship program. And you got to have good quality student athletes. And as I said, Malice, he was our white hope. He was fantastic, and he's here today, and I appreciate him coming. Alvin Gibson was at a whole different level. Reggie Wells, I think, is the best player, one of the best players ever to play here at Clarion University. With guys like that, you have a championship program. And Zumagale and people like that who come to practice every day and work twice as hard, you're just trying to get some playing time. Those are the guys sometimes don't get a chance to be a highlight film. Or Ebner, people like that who really work hard every day. It takes the team to make it happen. You can't do it alone. Nobody can do it alone. But those guys made us look like great coaches. And all the coaches sitting out there, if you don't have great players and great student athletes, you're not going to have a great team. It all boils down to good recruiting.
So let's shift gears. So now your basketball coaching career sort of comes to an end, and you're looking for a place to coach again. And tennis, Mr. Lignelli, I guess, must come to you and say, would you like to coach women's tennis? They had a losing program, and it turned into a great program. What were your thoughts going in, and how did you get that turned around?
Well, I never played high school tennis. I never played college tennis. But I had a big background in racquetball. I was nationally ranked 9th in the country, winning a number of tournaments in racquetball. So I felt I taught tennis and even wrote a book on tennis. And I felt like I could turn the program around. Mr. Lignelli wanted me to be the assistant basketball coach here at Clarion, but I told Mr. Lignelli that the head coach should pick his own assistant. So I applied for the women's tennis job. And I was fortunate for him to select me as a head tennis coach. It was a real challenge. They were 0-9 the year before I took over. They were 13th and 14th in the conference. They never had a winning season in the school's history. And I told Mr. Lignelli, I says, in 5 years we're going to be state champs. And he looked at me and he said, Norb, you got to be smoking some funny stuff. He actually told me that. He says, you might be taking drugs. What are you doing? He says, we never had a winning season in the school's history. I says, in 5 years, we're going to be state champs. Well, there were some people, the first couple of years, all our players were walk-ons because we didn't have any scholarships. And a lot of people have asked me over the years, did you do it by mystic, mirrors, or mirrors? What did you do? How'd you imagine? How'd you make it happen? And I'll tell you, in one word, it's sportsmanship. And I run a sportsmanship all-star game here. And because if you're honest and you care about people and you're persistent, anything good can happen. And I told Mr. Lignelli in 5 years we're going to be state champs. 4 years we were 9-4, And the fifth year, the last 4 years, we were undefeated in the fall, which is a great story. And I also wrote a book on it, and I hope you read it someday.
One last question on this topic, and that is, was one championship sweeter than the other? Of the 4 championships, which one was the best?
By far, the first one was the best. By far, the first one, the championship. In fact, Jane Bender, who was an academic All-American for us, the best thing I did with tennis is that we had a 100% graduation rate. And then we averaged our last 8 semesters, we were above a 3.0, which is the best thing I did for the tennis program. But we're on the platform, and Jane Bender comes up to me and says, "Coach, tell them we did it with no scholarships. They won't believe you." So I didn't say anything. But that was probably the sweetest, because we did it with mirrors, magic, and mystic. And I hope someday you read my book.
We've got maybe about 1 minute left. I know you wanted to talk a little bit about your involvement with the YMCA locally and how proud you were of that.
Well, here's a crazy story. I got some great story. Here's a crazy story. I would still be coaching tennis today. But what happened is when I took over the tennis program, we just had a fall season. They were 0-9. And for a couple of years, we struggled. I wrote a couple books on tennis, fundamentals, and also a playbook. And basically, I told Mr. Lignelli that we want to be state champs and we want to be national champs. So I volunteered my time in the spring season for 7 straight springs. It's about 2,000 hours of my time I donated. And I told Mr. Lignelli and I said to all the players, I said, unless I get some release time, just basically 2 classes of my tennis, I'm going to resign. And frankly, no, he said, Norb, you'll never resign. You got you're 4 years undefeated. I said, you still don't know who you're talking to, Mr. Lignelli. That's all I told him. So what happened, I didn't get release time, so I resigned. But I looked around and I said, what does Clarion Community need more than anything else? Because I grew up in inner city Buffalo. And I went to the YMCA every Saturday. In those days, we skinny dipped. We had the brown bag, and I played basketball. That's where I learned to play, because in Buffalo, it snows 9 months of the year, and I'm not kidding neither. But as far as I called the meeting in April 6, 1992, when I got out of tennis, and I said, anyone interested in starting a YMCA? Many people, coaches, community people, said it'll never happen. I said, you don't know who you're talking to yet. That's all I said. So for 29 years, I was the first chairman of the YMCA, the new YMCA. For 29 years, I worked to make it happen. And I hope some of you visit, because we have a $12 million YMCA that many people said it would never happen, but they don't know who they're talking to when they talk to me. That's all I'm saying.
I know you have a couple of thank yous, especially to your lovely wife, that you'd like to.
Anything that I've ever achieved, I want my wife to stand, please. Beverly, you're the main reason why any award that I've ever achieved is because of you. For the last 45 years, she's been my support, and I can't thank you enough. There's another thank you very much for all your support over the years, and for loving me and having 6 beautiful children. Thank you. There's a couple other people I'd like to thank. Thank you for my family, because without their support also, good things will not happen. And I also want to thank Katie Port Roth for joining us. She's been like a family member, because her and Grace have been super friends. The next thing I want to say is Father Bungo. If you have the Lord on your side, you're going to get in the Hall of Fame. And Father Bungo, I'm serious about this. Father Bungo wrote a letter that Don King couldn't write. That's all I can tell you. So, as I said, I want to thank Father Bungle for his support over the years. And the next person I want to thank is my good friend, Steve DeDurch. And here's a little story that I got to tell you. One of my girls got in the Hall of Fame. We had 3 tennis girls. There's going to be a lot more in the Hall of Fame, I predict, because we were undefeated 4 years. I don't think anyone's even come close to that, 4 years in a row. But one of our girls, Sue Fritz, had a nice write-up in the Clarion magazine, and I says, yeah. Steve called me, and he says, I read the article 3 times. And he says, you know, they never mentioned who the coach was. And all the other candidates, they mentioned the coach. So I read it, and I says, holy God, they didn't even mention my name. What? And I coached her for 4 years. So I send the article that Steve sent me, and I send to President Dale, and she called me and apologized, and she had Mr. Geiger send me a letter of apology, which I never had a letter of apology in 47 years. So I want to thank Dr. Dale and Mr. Geiger for that apology. And the next article, everything seemed to change. And I want to tell you right now, when Dr. Dale, her inaugural speech, she got my attention right off the bat, because number one, she said, the first thing I'm going to be is honest. And she showed me a lot of honesty when I showed her that situation. And she apologized and made up for it. So as I said, let's give Dr. Dale a nice hand for that. I have a story which is really interesting. Just 1 second here. I taught health and physical education for 39 years at Clarion University, and 2 of my students came here today from bowling students. And she came with the bowling thing. She bowled 226. To be honest with you, I didn't remember, to be honest with you, but she bowled 226. She says, none of my children believe I bowled that, so you got to sign it for me. And I want to thank Mr. and Mrs. Bowen for coming today, so appreciate that. And last, I want to thank some of the players, Jeff Ebner and Joe Malice, for coming here today. And Zumigale was supposed to be here, but he's sick. And of course, 2 of our Kiwanis people are here, Judy and Dr. Dede, because I've been a member of Kiwanis for 35 years. And of course, probably one of the all-time scorers in the history of Clarion University is Terry Thompson. I want to thank you all for coming and supporting me today. Thank you.